and we've got the body. Others believe that he actually didn't die. He went into a swoon. They call it the swoon theory. That he became unconscious, and when they put him in the tomb and left him, he got better. He woke up and got to feeling better and stretched a little bit and walked out. And the stone was rolled away from the door, and he's still out there somewhere. All kinds of things that people say. It's a lot easier to believe the text of the Bible and go ahead and admit that it really did happen. If you don't understand all about it, then join the crowd. I don't either. I don't have a grasp of all of it, but I believe in the one who does have a grasp of all of it. So my confidence is not in what people say and write, and they put it in books and sell it to people like me. I'll be glad to read it. I've read lots of theories and different things on it. But what I really believe is the text itself, and I take it to be literal unless there's some obvious reason for it to be figurative. I know that Herod was not a fox. I understand that. But we study simile, metaphor, personification, all these other figures of speech. We can use those, and the Lord used them, and we can use them too. But we need to be sure that we don't make everything figurative or symbolic of something. I still believe that the Lord created, that God created in 6 24-hour days. Now, I'm in the minority on that, but I still believe that he did. It doesn't do anything to my faith or to the stability of my faith to go ahead and admit that the text is literal and real. I know there are a lot of challenges to that, but I still believe that Jesus went into the tomb on a Friday afternoon because it was getting close to sundown and they had to hurry. They were just so religious, they had to hurry to get the man they had just murdered into a tomb. Now that's irony if I've ever seen it. But he's in the tomb, and then early on the first day of the week, he is raised from the dead. And he comes out, and he appears to several people at different times. On that evening, he appears to these two disciples who are leaving the city of Jerusalem, going west for about 7 miles to the community called Emmaus. I got to walk on that road in 1993, and that's one of the two things that stood out to me as the most important things that I got to do, is to walk on that road, because it's still there, and the little stones that were there still there. And Jesus walked on that, and these two disciples were too. The second thing that stands out to me as the most important was the Sea of Galilee, because they haven't drained it, they haven't bombed it, and they haven't built a cathedral over it. It's still right where it was. And I got to go out in a boat that day. My wife and our daughter, who just graduated from college, and our son, who had just graduated from high school, the four of us went on a trip. That was the last trip we went on as a foursome. We got more now in the family, so I don't go anywhere. They can go anywhere they want to. But we really enjoyed the trip. It's a faith-building experience. Right now, of course, it's too dangerous to go over there. And there's some brethren over there right now who can't get flights out. It's really a difficult time, and I'm really, really sorry all this stuff happened. But the things that happened, according to the Scriptures, were right there. We went in the Garden of Gethsemane and saw some of those old olive trees, those gnarled roots sticking up. They weren't there when Jesus was there, but some of these were reputed to be as much as 600 years old. And that's pretty old. And it probably looked a lot like that when Jesus was in the garden. Well, back to the topic. I am watching my clock, by the way. I promise that we won't run too far over. And we won't at the next service, and we won't this afternoon. In fact, I am planning for the afternoon to be a class-type session, meaning that you can talk if you want to. You can ask a question or make a comment. And feel free to do that, but don't feel obligated to do that. One lady told me several years ago in Murray, she said, I just felt like that you needed something to fill the time. And so that's the reason I talked so much. I said, well, I don't need anything to fill the time. But you're welcome to say whatever you want to and ask a question or make a comment if you want to. I won't stop and ask you to, but feel free to if you want to. Jesus has been crucified and has been buried and has now been raised. And on that evening, these two disciples are walking home. And they are sad. They're disappointed because they thought there was going to be someone to take the place of the Roman Empire. He was going to set up a kingdom that would overthrow the brutal Roman Empire. And they're disappointed because he got killed. Now, remember, Jesus has told his followers lots of times he's going to be raised. And they must have meant he means something figurative about that. Or he's being symbolic of something else. They just didn't get it. Most of them didn't get it. In fact, I don't think the apostles got a good grasp of it. They don't seem to have. And they were the closest to him. But anyway, he was raised on that first day of the week. That tomb was empty. And here these two disciples are leaving the city of Jerusalem, going west to Emmaus, and they're walking along, talking to each other about how sad they are, how disappointed they are that the one we thought was going to be the Messiah got killed. And the kingdom that he was going to set up would overthrow the brutal Roman Empire. Jesus appears there with them, and he talks with them, and he listens to them. I thought that was interesting. He listened. Everybody who's going to try to help somebody needs to learn to listen, including me and including you. If we don't listen, we miss something. First of all, we're going to misevaluate the situation because the person may not believe what we thought that person believed. The person may believe something completely different from what you'd been told the person believes. Or it might be that there's some information that would educate you and me. We don't know everything. I had a long talk with my uncle several years ago who was a kind of a, I guess they call him lay minister, I don't know what they call it, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And he grew up the same way my mother did, in a home where the people became members of the Henry Church of Christ when they got big enough. And everybody in the family did. But he had ventured off. He married a very strong-willed woman who converted him to her, which meant her church. And so he's trying to deal with all that on some of the Sabbath things. And we're talking about it. And he's just learned the doctrine and is going to defend it best he knows how. And I was never able to make any headway with him at all. He said, I've heard all that. I heard that when I was a child. I said, it hasn't changed in whether it's true or not just because you heard it as a child. He said, well, it's just much more vast. And he says, you're not even talking about the right prophecies anyway. And so he dives off into some prophecies. And I'm thinking, okay, the kingdom prophecies were fulfilled in the time of Jesus said, some of you won't taste of death until you've seen the kingdom come with power. That's Mark chapter 9, verse 1. And then Paul was writing to the Colossians and said that you've been translated out of the power of darkness into the kingdom of God's dear Son, or the Son of his love. They were in the kingdom. And Peter was given the promise, in fact, for all the apostles in Matthew chapter 16, I'll build my church on that rock. And the rock is his deity. Peter had just confessed, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus pronounced a blessing upon him. And then he said, I'll build my church on that one. That's the great Gibraltar rock that I'll build my church on. And he said, I'll give you the keys of the kingdom. And the keys of the kingdom were used and unlocking the kingdom that had been prophesied in Joel 2 and Daniel 2 and Isaiah 2. Now in Acts 2, they're fulfilled. And those are things we can count on because it's right there in the text. Well, all of those things regarding the prophets and Moses, these two disciples were talking about that. And so Jesus said, tell me what you're talking about, why you're looking so sad. And Cleopas snaps back at him and said, are you the only guy around here that doesn't know what's going on? And that's what I think is funny. He's the only one around there who did know what was going on, really. And so Cleopas has to snap at him. And finally, Jesus began at the scripture that they were talking about regarding Moses and the prophets and explained to them what all had happened. And then he is there walking with them when he's just been raised from the dead, which is the key, the turning point for everything in the Bible and certainly in Christianity. So they're talking and he explains to them. They get toward where they're going and it's getting toward sundown. And he seems to be going farther down the road, but they said, abide with us. Fast falls the eventide, the darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. Obviously, that song was based on this story. And we find where he goes in with them, and they sit down to eat. And he offers thanks for the bread. I don't think that's funny. I just think that's so ironic. He's thanking the Father for the bread. And when that happens, they have their eyes opened. And then he disappears. They learned a lot that day. Now here it is. Remember, it's getting close to bedtime. It's getting close to dark. Guess what they did? They turned around and went back to Jerusalem. You say, well, they had headlights on their... No, they didn't have headlights on their vehicles. And they didn't have GPS. What they did was go back to Jerusalem. Maybe they had torches, some way to light the path. Don't know. But Jesus disappeared from their table, and then he appears in Jerusalem when the disciples are met on that evening of his resurrection. One old boy is absent. Now, Judas is gone. He's not absent. He's gone. And Thomas was not there for some reason. I heard a preacher in Tennessee several years ago who said, don't ever miss church on Sunday night. Don't ever miss on Sunday night. And he gave the example of Judas being absent on that evening, and then Jesus appeared. And the others told him, said, we've seen the risen Lord. Thomas says, I do not believe you. I'm not sure he's saying I don't believe in the resurrection. I think he's saying I don't believe y'all. If they spoke Southern back then. Y'all. Peter, aren't you the one that just denied him a few days ago? And I'm supposed to believe you when you say he's been raised from the dead? Well, he had been for sure. So the next Lord's Day evening, they're gathered again, and Thomas is present. And you remember he said, I won't believe until I have touched him and seen him and so forth. And Jesus says, Thomas, reach hither your finger and place it in my hands. Reach hither your hand and place it in my side. And do not be faithless, but believing. And Thomas, it doesn't say Thomas touched him. I heard a preacher on the radio the other day said that Thomas had to see him and touch him before he would believe. It does not say he touched him. Read it. Thomas's response was, my Lord and my God. Jesus pronounced a blessing on him and on you and me. In the text, he says, Thomas, you've seen and believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And here we are, gathered as people who believe in the crucified and risen Son of God with a blessing placed upon us by the Lord himself. It's a wonderful thing. As these fellows have finished that, first of all, if you want to look on the back of your first page, points to ponder. I know we won't cover all of these things in any detail, but try to trade places if you can with these two disciples. I don't want to be too hard on them because their faith was wavering. I've had some issues too in the past. In the next hour, I'm going to talk to you about one of those. But here they are. They wanted to believe, but they had a preconceived idea of what they were going to have happen, and it didn't happen the way they thought it was going to. So they're sad, they're disappointed, they know they have more Roman rule now to look forward to, and it's not a pleasant thing for them. All right? It looked like he had been killed before the kingdom could be set up, and what could they do now? Their confidence in the Scriptures that they had read and tried to believe was fading in their hearts. How might you or I have responded to that in the same circumstances? We have an idea of what's supposed to happen, and it doesn't happen that way. You ever made plans, prayed for wisdom and insight to make good decisions, and then it blew up in your face? Join the crowd. 1989, I was sure that the Lord wanted me and for my family to move to Nashville. Some people think of it as Mecca. I don't. But anyway, I met with a church up there, one of the elders, all of the elders, and we met, and it was a great meeting, and they just needed somebody to preach on Sundays, and that's all. Just show up on Sundays and preach, and we'll take care of everything else. Well, that's really neat if you want to go to school full-time and work on your doctorate at Vanderbilt, and if you want to be sure that you're getting it right and working, teaching full-time. At that time, Lipscomb had an opening, and Dr. Carol Ellis gave me verbal approval for being a full-time faculty member in the speech department. And I was going to school at Vanderbilt part-time and do my program in 3 years and come out Dr. Dale. Doesn't that sound good? Sounded real good. So I resigned at Glendale as 7th of Poplar then. I wasn't mad at anybody. Everything was going fine, and that's a good time to leave before it doesn't go fine. But I announced it, and one of the elders said in the meeting before, of course I talked to them first, and he said, "Would you reconsider?" And I said, "Well, thank you. I didn't want you to say good riddance. I really appreciate you saying that, and I know you meant it, and I thank you for that. But we've looked at it, and my wife they have an opening for a school nurse at Lipscomb Elementary and High School, and she's a registered nurse. She can work there. I'll preach over at this church, and I'll go to school part-time, and I'll teach full-time at Lipscomb." It's just a great thing. It's going to work. It's just going to work. Well, everything messed up. Within 3 weeks, everything blew up. And the church where I was supposed to go was split from within. I didn't know it. I couldn't tell. But they were having the man who was already there as the preacher, they were having him to diminish some things, but to stay on full time, full salary, and do visiting and other things that he had been doing, and I understand he was pretty good at it, but that somebody else would be in the pulpit. Well, I'm the guy from Kentucky who's coming in to be in the pulpit, like I was some kind of a master at it or something. And he didn't want me to come, and his wife especially didn't want me to come, and others didn't, and so they all just left. A good number left. Okay? One thing after another happened, and so I'm finding out that the thing is really torn up. And then Dr. Ellis called me from Lipscomb, and he said, "John, I hate to tell you this, but we have somebody who has the PhD already who has applied for this job, and we've got to have him because of our accreditation. So appreciate your willingness to consider coming." I thought, consider coming? I'm packing. Anyway, we didn't have anything in writing, and I didn't think you had to, but now I know you do. But it's fine. And then the secretary in one of the offices at Vanderbilt called and said, "We have not gotten your transcript from Oklahoma Christian, and we can't officially admit you until we get that transcript." I thought, well, that'll be the easiest part of it all. It'll be one phone call, and I have to send them $1.50, which I'll be glad to do. And that was easy. The other two things were not easy at all. And so I remember sitting on the couch. The kids were in bed. Marcia and I were sitting on the couch. And she said, have you prayed sufficiently about this? I said, would you define sufficiently? We both prayed. We prayed together. We prayed separately. Others were praying, and it looked like literally too good to be true. And it didn't work. So I meet with the elders. I said, do you remember what you said when I told you I was leaving? And one of them said, yes, I'm the one that said it. Would you reconsider? I said, I've reconsidered. And I did. And I said, I won't do that again. If I leave, you'll have to ask me to leave because I'm not leaving here. Bought cemetery lots. And we're staying and staying and staying in Murray. Well, when you have something in mind that you think is going to work, these two disciples had in mind what they knew was going to happen. Jesus was the answer to all their prayers, all of their questions regarding a kingdom that would not be so coercive and abrasive. And it didn't work, and they're sad. You might have felt that way too. I might have felt that way too if I already knew what was supposed to happen and it didn't. It's a lot better to pray for what you want, take what you get, and if it's good, thank God for it. And if it's not good, pray that He'll work in it for good and keep doing that till you die. That's when I learned to do that. Pray for what you want and what you think is best. If what comes is not good, pray that He will work in it for good and to His glory. That's what we're here for anyway. And pray that it will be, if it's good, thank God for it because He's the giver of every good and perfect gift. And so when I go pray for somebody to get well and they don't get well, I'm still praying for the will of the Lord to be accomplished through all this and for the family to be blessed. I had a funeral yesterday for one of our deacons who was in charge of benevolence, one of the best workers we had. But he couldn't live any longer. He just turned 65 so he could have Medicare and start drawing Social Security, and died. So that's sad. I'm sorry for the family, and it's sad. But that wasn't my plan. That wasn't his plan. That wasn't the family's plan. The church had ideas for him. But he's gone. That can be a real lesson for all the rest of us. We can deal with adversarial situations when they come up. When Jesus joined these two guys on the road, He listened to them. Remember how important it is to listen. And so He asked them something, and they said, don't you know what's going on? Sometimes if you just feel kind of low and you need a kind of a cheer, read that over and over again. Are you the only one around here that doesn't know what's going on? And Jesus, in a very nice way, said, I'm the only one around here who does know what's going on. And this is what's going on. Number 3, they urged Him to stay with them, so they sat down to eat. He took the bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened. I don't want to overwork the passage, but when you and I take the Lord's Supper, is that just because it's Sunday? Or is that just because what we do and nobody else around us does it that often? Is it so we can be unique? One fellow was explaining to one of his friends who asked him why we did it so often. He said, well, we're supposed to be peculiar people, and that's pretty peculiar. Please, there's got to be more reasoning than that in it. What we can do is make it as meaningful as possible, or we can do it as a ritual and think nothing of it. I've been quite concerned since COVID and all the things when you go in and you pick up a little cup, and more than one person has said, let's keep doing it even when we don't have to because it frees up some time. Are we in that big a hurry? We can't take time to think of the body and blood of the Lord, to do it with thanksgiving and understand better and appreciate more what He's done for us? Are we that big of clock watchers? We need to be sure we do see something significant in the breaking of the bread and the partaking of the fruit of the vine. And here, when this happens, these guys' eyes are opened and Jesus disappears. He's gone. And then notice the bottom. The 2 disciples left immediately and went back to Jerusalem. I don't know whether they even ate or not. The food was there. They didn't sleep. I've always thought sleep was grossly overrated. And it's not because I don't sleep well. I never have. When I was a baby, I didn't sleep well. And I still don't. And I don't think it's a virtue. It's just the way it is with me. If I sleep 2 hours in a row, I probably won't sleep much more that night. If I sleep 4 hours in a row, I've got a headache or hangover, whatever you call it. I never sleep more than 4 hours in a row. And you need about 8 hours, and I need about 8 hours, but I don't get it. And I'm okay with that. My wife is okay with it. When she finds I'm gone in the night, she never wonders where I am. Fortunately, I've never given her any reason not to trust me, but I'm at the office. I sleep every night in a sweatsuit, just a pullover shirt and some kind of sweatpants. And all I have to do is fall out of bed and jump in my shoes, and I'm gone. And I can be at the office. I can get more done between 3 in the morning and 8 in the morning than I'll get done all day long. I'm there by myself. The phone's not ringing. Nobody's needing anything. And when everybody else came to work at 8, I was ready to go home and take a shower and get ready. I did it for years and years. The thing is, these people probably would be going to bed normally, but this is a big deal. This is a major thing happening. They've gone back to Jerusalem, and that's where they find this disciples gathered, and they're talking. They're adjusting to the fact that Jesus has been raised from the dead. It's very important that they be able to do that. Now, is there anybody who has a comment or question about this? I don't know all the answers, but I'm interested, as you are, in what's going on here. Is there something in this that generates a question or comment from you? Anybody? Oh. Sure. Yeah. Sure. I think they represent us real well, I think. And I wish I knew more about it, but someday I'll find out. Right now, I just have to read what you read. And I don't have any insights that you don't have on it. Yes, sir. That's right. That's exactly right. I was a senior in high school when President Kennedy was assassinated. And in November of 1963, and I was a senior getting ready to graduate in 64. And there were a lot of things about him that I didn't like. And so we had been warned, and many of you were in that age group, and you understand, we were warned about having a president who was Catholic and what it would do to us as a nation. And if you were a Republican, you have to remember he was a Democrat, so there's always that to talk about. Believe me, I didn't come to here to talk about that. And I won't. But when you have in mind what's supposed to happen and it doesn't happen, when your leader is gone, you feel like something is missing that probably can't be fixed. I felt a lot that way when James Thurman died. Some of you might have known him. He was an elder at 7th and Poplar in Glendale, and was just a dear friend. I mean, my dad died when I moved to 7th and Poplar, about the same week. And Brother Thurman became my dad in a lot of ways. He called me John Boy. That's all he ever called me, was John Boy. And we traveled together. We went out of the country together. We did stuff together. We talked and prayed and cried and did a lot of things together. And I knew he was going to die. It was obvious that he wasn't going to live much longer. But I felt more like sitting with the family that day than I did trying to make a speech at the funeral. But I didn't think we were doomed, but it is such an adjustment that has to be made. And we need to get ready for that as best we can and be sure that we are ready for that adjustment, because it does come. Everybody dies. Everybody. So we need to get ready without being morbid. We need to get ready for it and have a plan in mind of what we'll do next and how we'll respond and react. Anybody else have a comment? I enjoyed studying it with you, enjoyed probing it with you. I still don't know all the answers, but I think it's a great idea to keep it before us and to have some sympathy for these two guys, because they inspired lots of songs. This story inspired lots of good songs. Let's have a word of prayer and we'll be dismissed from our class time. Father in heaven, we thank you for the teachings of the Bible, for the stories that can teach us much and can give us inspiration for greater and greater faith, even when we don't fully grasp what's happening. Thank you for these two disciples on the road to Emmaus and what they experienced and what Jesus did for them and what he does for us. A little while as we partake of the Lord's Supper, we pray that we will have a greater appreciation and see through the eye of faith the crucified and risen Son of God. In his name we pray. Amen.